First of all, let's speak to Joseph Kotrie-Monson. He's a criminal defence lawyer in Fleet Street. He specialises in sexual offences. Do you think the Tories need to have a rethink, Joseph?
I think, first of all, the myth that these were necessary cuts because of wastage in the legal aid system is a media and political fabrication. Anyone who, in those early 2000s, was a proponent of should be hanging their heads in shame. In real terms, for a decade previous to austerity, our justice system had faced the worst assault on the legal aid funding since the post-war settlement in the 1950s. Now, as far as the narrative today is concerned, it really relates to people being paid back their legal costs if they win. And that was the effect of LASPO, Legal Aid Sentencing Punishment of Offenders Act, around 5 years ago. And all that right to be paid back the money you've spent, not having asked, crucially, to have been prosecuted in the first place, that money paid back that you've had to incur on lawyers, well, that no longer exists in the same way. If you use private lawyers, you're paid back at a derisory legal aid rate. If you qualify for legal aid but don't want a legal aid lawyer, because legal aid, sadly, we know is just is close to inadequate in some cases, you will get nothing back if you pay privately. Now, it's worth also adding, perversely, you may think, that the power to recoup prosecution and any legal aid costs on the part of the state from a defendant, if he or she's found guilty, still exists. So these rules, you know, they are not just swinging, but they also penalise unfairly somebody who's been acquitted in a criminal case.
OK, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Also, give us an example of someone with what particular kind of case that would need legal aid, in your opinion,
well,
Joseph?
The example that I hope most people listening to will identify with is somebody who has been accused of a sexual offence, not necessarily because they're going to be, but because it's so easy to imagine that your cousin, your nephew, you know, could be. It's so easy to make an accusation and then to find yourself in the need of a lawyer in the Crown Court to avoid a sentence that could be in double figures. Of course, the psychological trap that we all fall into, isn't it, Ian, is that we think, oh, well, you know, something like that, you know, that would be me paying for criminals if my tax-paying money goes into that. I'm a good citizen. I don't break laws. It won't happen to me. But you know what, Ian? 2/3 of the cases going through Crown Courts, sexual offences. As a specialist in the area, I can tell you most of them have never been in trouble. And the vast majority, do you know what they say when they come? I didn't think it would happen to me. Nigel Evans himself talked about it, didn't he, in his latest? He says that when it realised it had happened to him, and despite having voted the other way, it was now going to affect him. He called it a road to Damascus moment. Don't we pay politicians to be a little more broad than their own narrow personal experience? I think it's great that he's gone through this process, but what a shame.
Yes. Well, again, and one would have great sympathy for him on the other hand of everything that he's been through, I suppose. There's a kind of theory from people like me who've never had to use the justice system like this, that if you get legal aid, your lawyer won't be as good. Is that a myth?
I think 10, 15 years ago, there was relative equality of arms. I think the reality is that, and it pains me to say this, we were a firm that did nothing but legal aid in 25 years. You know, we've had to reconfigure the way we work in order to be able to provide a decent service and take as much legal aid as we can. But just the fact that I say that in those words, it shows you, doesn't it, that if you're a committed lawyer and you're trying to do legal aid, it's an unwinnable battle to be able to do what you would like to do. You know, 5, 10 years ago, maybe there was a chance that wouldn't be the case. But with all the will in the world, and no matter how committed the people working, for tuppence compared to what their corporate colleagues are in different areas of the profession, no matter what level of commitment and sense of duty those people have, the reality is, if you're accused of a criminal offence and you can in any way obtain the money, as Nigel Evans did, selling his family business, his inheritance and a family property, you've got to put your hand in your pocket because it's too much to risk, and that's something that has to change.
Nice to speak to you. Thank you, Joseph. Joseph Kotrie-Monson, who's a criminal defence lawyer at Monson Solicitors. They specialise in sexual offences.